All right, people, we are live. Kirk Herbstreit's dog is currently in the booth up and starting to call this game, I think. There's 2 minutes left. We're at the 2-minute warning. Don't call the timeout. And TCU has demolished North Carolina. It's currently 48-14. I guess it's possible they break off another run. But oh boy, this was lopsided. I picked TCU to win. They were a 3.5-point favorite. I thought there was a pretty good shot they would win this game comfortably. I didn't see this coming. I didn't see North Carolina playing this bad. So I appreciate everybody who's here. The video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Throw in any comments you have. Let's just talk about this. Andrew T starts off, college ain't so easy, Bill. And I think about this a lot with Belichick, where it's like, you may have noticed there were a lot of NFL people, NFL media people, really hyping up this Bill Belichick game, really convinced that he was just going to waltz in and kind of take control of college football because they seem to think college football is pretty easy. They did the same to Deion Sanders too. It didn't go well the first year, but credit to Deion Sanders, he got it turned around in year 2. And I'm not saying Bill Belichick is not going to turn it around, but when you looked at this North Carolina team, this roster, kind of the vibe of the whole thing, it hasn't looked like a team that is going to kind of get things going this year. And my biggest takeaway from this first game is just how completely unsound they looked fundamentally. Outside of that first drive, I mean, dropped passes, horrible blocking and gap contain on defense, fumbles, just like they don't know. Like, they look like a team who's barely ever played together. They look like a low-level G5 or even an FCS team, and not even a good FCS team. There are dozens and dozens of college football teams that would have destroyed or at least beaten this North Carolina team that was out there on the field today. So, they say you make your biggest gains from game 1 to game 2, and there is a lot to be made. I don't even, if you're North Carolina, I don't know what positives you take out of this. Like, nothing went well, unless you want to say Max Johnson and backup time was slinging the ball a little bit. Maybe he's the guy you go with at quarterback. So maybe you don't go 2 real-time hours without completing a pass. And TCU has turned the corner inside the 10-yard line. We'll see if they get that in and cross 50. This game, by the way, this is what I thought TCU was going to do to Colorado 3 years ago, 2023, against Deion Sanders. But it turns out that, one, Deion Sanders had 2 elite talents on his team in Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter. And North Carolina didn't have that. But 2, like, Deion Sanders knew college football. He had been a high school assistant for Shedeur. He'd been several years at Jackson State, like slumming it at the bottom, slumming it at the FCS level at a school without a lot of funding. Bill Belichick and some of the people on his staff do not know what college football is. And they didn't even get that first year bump of new coach, NFL guy. A lot of recruits want to come play for you. Like, they didn't do that. Deion Sanders was at least bringing in some big name transfers, or at least getting guys to fill spots. And North Carolina didn't really do that. Mika Lambert in the chat says TCU got some really good transfers on offense. Yes, they did, including that receiver Dwyer from Idaho, I think it was. Jordan Dwyer, 9 catches, 136 yards, 1 touchdown. So a lot of I've mostly talked about North Carolina here because that's kind of the shocking thing. But you got to credit TCU. That looks like a good team. Like, North Carolina looks completely lost, but TCU looks like a comfortable team. They dominated in the trenches in a way we haven't seen in a couple of years. Josh Hoover looked very comfortable, made very smart decisions with the ball. And it was a team that looked focused. And when David and I were at Big 12 Media Days about a month ago, more than a month ago, we asked Sonny Dykes, like, and TCU players, we said, like, did you get caught up in the hype of Deion Sanders in Colorado in 2023? And how do you make sure that doesn't happen? And Sonny Dykes was honest. He was like, yeah, we did. Like, we thought, he's like, everybody on our team thought we were going to come out and destroy them. And very early on, when it was clear that wasn't the case, our guys panicked. And Josh Hoover, we talked to at media days, said the same thing. Said that they weren't ready for that. And it's important to remember that TCU team that was coming off the national championship appearance, they replaced a ton of guys, all the leaders, no Max Duggan, all that kind of stuff. And that was a new team. This is not a new TCU team. They brought a lot of guys back. You brought Josh Hoover back. You kept him from Tennessee. Tennessee wanted him after Nico Iamaleava left. TCU stepped up with the money to keep him. That's going to pay off. They look like a good team. That's a team is going to make noise in the Big 12. So TCU looks pretty good. Sam Callan says Sonny Dykes can say he beat the greatest football coach ever. That's true, man. That's a win you know he's going to appreciate and enjoy and have that on his resume forever. How many guys who have never been in the NFL can say they beat Bill Belichick? How many guys, period, can say they beat Bill Belichick? Not many. Now, it might be more after this year, but not many can do that. And we had, David and I, we talked to a lot of college coaches in the offseason, and David wrote a story about this. But there were a lot of college coaches who wanted TCU to do this and wanted the college guys to show that Bill Belichick can't just walk into college football never having done it and succeed. Like the college guys, like, we got to show that, like, we know what we're doing here in college football, and you can't just come in and do that. And so a lot of coaches, I'm sure, are feeling pretty good about that, especially if you're in the ACC and you have North Carolina on your schedule. That was the UNC football schedule. Like, I came into the year thinking like 6 wins, maybe 7 wins. I didn't think TCU was one of them, though. Here's the rest of the schedule: Charlotte, Richmond. You got to win both those two. At UCF, maybe. UCF struggled with Jacksonville State in week 1, maybe. Clemson, loss. Cal looked pretty good, so that might have looked like a win, maybe now looks like a loss. Virginia, it's a game you got to have. Syracuse, hard to say right now. Stanford has to be a win. Wake Forest has to be a win. Duke and NC State. So if the games that they should win, they have to win: Wake, Stanford, Richmond, and Charlotte. If you win those, you get to 4 wins right there. Do you have 2 wins elsewhere on the schedule? The team that showed up tonight doesn't. So I got to think 4-8 is the floor for North Carolina. If it's any worse than that, then you've got big problems. But this is the thing with college football. It's like, if they're bad next year, it's not like you get the number 1 pick. Recruiting is a lot harder than drafting. You don't get rewarded. It's worse for you the worse you are as a team, as opposed to the way it is in college football. Some other people in the comments here. Brian Banks, we stunk that year too. Didn't even make a bowl. Lost way too much after the title run. Yeah, he's talking about that TCU team in 2013. I think they went 5-7 that year. Greg R2, the funniest game from this weekend easily. And I thought that Sac State getting battered was the ultimate this weekend. I had missed that until this morning when somebody texted me about Sacramento State. They lost 20-3 to South Dakota State, which, yes, South Dakota State is the top, one of the top teams in FBS, although they did lose their coach and a bunch of their top players, who's at Washington State now. But that's 2 big, like, pieces of humble pie for the Sacramento State people that have talked a lot, and for the people around Bill Belichick or around UNC who hyped up Bill Belichick. Sam Callan, TCU manhandled them. They really did. Let me see what the final numbers are here. TCU averaged 7.4 yards per rush. That includes the kneel down at the end of the game, and it includes sacks. So you take that out, you're probably at almost 9-10 yards per carry. North Carolina averaged 1.8 yards per carry. That is brutal. TCU, like, it was so that first drive, North Carolina moving the pile, opening holes, you run it down. Gio Lopez hits a couple guys with good throws, and it's a touchdown. And I'm like, Like, I know in the back of my mind, I'm like, all right, scripted drive versus unscripted. They're going to adjust. This is how college football works all the time. But I was impressed with how North Carolina offensive line did on that first drive. And then they did nothing the rest of the game. The next couple of drives were like 2 yards, 0 yards, 1 yard, -1 yard, pick six. And they never, they had a couple of sacks. There's a sack fumble in there, the scoop and score. TCU just literally did manhandle them. And I think TCU has to be feeling pretty good, not just because you beat Bill Belichick and whatnot, but like your guys played fundamentally sound. You did what a good, competent, focused football team is supposed to do, and that is take advantage of the mistakes your opponent is giving you. And North Carolina gave them a lot. The most points allowed in the season opener in UNC history, 48. Also, the most points that Bill Belichick has ever allowed in a game, ties the most. I think he gave up 48 once in the NFL. Brian Banks, Sonny Dykes has beaten Gary Patterson. That is true. In response to Sonny Dykes can say he'd be the greatest football coach ever. I wonder what Gary Patterson is feeling right now. He obviously some hard feelings after he was let go. He briefly, I think it was this offseason, I think he briefly spent some time on the Baylor staff as like an analyst or something like that. And can you imagine if he was on the sideline for this game, the grin he would have on the sideline, the things he might say after the game or something like that? That would be a lot of fun. Sonny's going to be a little bit more reserved, probably. Greg R2, you just know that Sonny Dykes was pissed about the lead up to this game. I don't think pissed is the word. I think he saw it as an opportunity because, like we said, with Colorado, that was a new team. He kind of had to figure his guys out. I think we talked to him at media days. He felt pretty good about this team. And I think the Belichick thing was an opportunity for his team to get focused and not get caught up in that, because you have your quarterback, you have your captains, and you just do what you need to do. And that works. Jeff Gervis, 70 new players. No way it was going to be polished right away. No, absolutely not. And I'm not saying it's not going to work at North Carolina. It just, you knew coming in, this was not the roster that was going to get that. Oh, there, I can show it on the screen. 70 new players. No way it was going to be polished right away. Correct. I think the concerning thing is, like, if you talk to people on the recruiting trails and high school coaches or whatnot, like UNC's been very up and down in recruiting. There are some pretty big our colleague Grace Rayner wrote a really good story on Bill Belichick's recruiting. I will say a month or a couple months ago. There's a lot of like big name schools who said like they heard from Belichick or UNC like right when he got the job, and they hadn't heard anything since then. And so it's been very kind of all over the place. Because North Carolina is a very talented high school state, and there has not been very much focus on the in-state recruiting from everything I can see, and that has kind of irked some people. Greg R. How long did it take Gio to complete another pass? Over an hour, close to 2. So he completed 2 on the first drive, and then he went 2 hours and 7 minutes between that and his next completed pass. I actually legit felt bad for him that ESPN kept showing that graphic, like showing his name and his face and everything like that. Has not completed a pass since 8-12. Like that felt a little like, that's a little bit much. You could just say North Carolina hasn't completed a pass. I don't know if you needed to include him, but look, we live in the day and age where players are getting paid now, and I guess that kind of comes with the territory. Gregor, they host Clemson. Dabo already has a chip on his shoulder. I don't think Dabo would want to run the score up on Bill Belichick. Although he has his own things to figure out with his team right now, but I don't think he'll try to score and go for 4th downs late in the game like TCU just did right there. Brian makes Gary Patterson is now on a podcast. He's coming for your job. I did not realize that. Curious how long it is. He's a guy who likes to go along, which we appreciate in the media. You know who else has a podcast? Matt Rule, doing that in season. He's also doing a weekly hit on McAfee. I don't know how these guys find the time, but I actually think it's a smart move, at least the McAfee part of it for him. UNC needed a case of Chernobyl. Jeff, is that the thing from Hot Tub Time Machine? The energy drink that they pour into the hot tub to like end up going back in time? That's what Chernobyl is, right? If that's assuming that's what you meant to write. Greg R2, Oh, Jeff says yes. Yes. Chernobyl from Hot Tub Time Machine. Great movie. Awesome. John Cusack, Rob Corddry. Great movie. Gregor, one would think that this weekend would calm down all the overwhelming hype that some QBs and teams and coaches, but I doubt that will happen. Look, I mean, it's the first week of college football. You know, you want to hype people up, you want to hype teams up. We do that. We make all kinds of lists of like, you know, the top transfers, the top quarterbacks. By the way, credit to Sam Khan and Antonio Morales, my colleagues. They had Josh Hoover, the number 9 quarterback in the country coming into the year. He very much looked like it. But, you know, like everything's going to be hyped up in the offseason, especially because with college football, there's so many teams and all that stuff. It is hard for people to kind of know everything. When there's 32 NFL teams, you know, you can have your segments and follow everybody pretty easily. So, you know, people get hyped up and all that. I don't mind it. It was Arch overhyped. I mean, think about that is interesting coming in. The two biggest stories in college football coming into the season, Arch Manning, Bill Belichick. Both completely fell flat on their face in week 1. And that is ultimately, I think, not good for the sport as a whole in terms of like keeping casual fan audience attention, which I think is important. You look at the numbers that made. Do you remember the numbers that Deion Sanders was getting for Colorado games that first year? That Colorado State game that started at like 10:30 at night and got, I want to say, like 10 million viewers. That was insane. College football just has not had many like breakout crossover characters, stars. Arch is that, and Bill Belichick is that. I always use like the mother-in-law test. My mother-in-law knows who Arch Manning is because she loves Peyton Manning. And she knows who Bill Belichick is. So she will be curious what Bill Belichick is doing. She will maybe watch a game that's involving one of those two. And college football just has not had that. Really, I mean, Deion was one, but before that, like Johnny Manziel, I think, like in terms of like, and people can say they don't like the hype and all that kind of stuff, but it is important. You do need to kind of make some stars, and it's been kind of something I think holding college football back a little bit. What did the Big 12 here? The Big 12 tweets a 34-point win over the 33rd team. Well done. I wonder how early they saved that one. Got it up in the drafts. So we'll see. I don't know how to pronounce your name here. Sacha. Am I imagining it, or are the defenses ahead of the offenses this year so far? Yes, 100%. A few reasons. One, defenses are always ahead of offenses early on, just by nature. But two, in a lot of the big games, you have a lot of first-year quarterbacks and a lot of offensive line shuffling. And that makes for a steeper learning curve. I realized pretty early in the week that if you're a betting man, week 1 first half unders is the way to go to make some money, because it takes several drives for everybody to figure out what they're doing. There were so many games that were like 7-3 at halftime. And then, then some stuff would happen later on. But that's just, that's how college football works, because we don't have preseason games. We just have fall camp, and then boom, top 10 matchup to start your year. At least it doesn't end your season now, like it sometimes did in the past. Let's see. And same things from the same person, unrelated to this game, but felt like lots of lower scoring games among the top teams. Yes, I think that will change as it goes on. I think Arch Manning will be fine. I think Julian Sand will be fine. I think CJ Carr will look fine. I thought CJ Carr actually looked pretty poised, for his first college football experience coming on the road at Miami. Those teams will get better. Those offenses will get better. Patty C, after the first week of college football, who are you most curious about, interested to keep your eye on? That's a good question. Let me pull up my 131 rankings, which are coming out tomorrow. They are complete. I will not spoil it for you. You're going to have to check it out tomorrow. Utah. So a stat I didn't know until today after the reaction pod came out. Utah pressured Nico Iamaleava on 59% of his dropbacks. That is nuts. For all the supposed frustration he had with the lack of offensive line being built around him at Tennessee, there is nothing there for him at UCLA. That is a problem. USF, I'm curious. Spoiler alert, but they move up very far in the rankings this week. I'm curious if they can. They got Florida, and then they have Miami. Do they just get blown out and look like another kind of whatever G5 team, or do they have some edge, keep it close, battle for a bit? I don't know. We'll see. I'm very curious to see how they look. And Michigan, Oklahoma. I'll be at the game. I'm curious. Bryce Underwood looked solid against New Mexico, made some good throws, clearly has so much more ability than the guys they were throwing out there last year at quarterback. And then at Oklahoma, John Mateer looked good, but Oklahoma could not run the ball against Illinois State. So I'm very curious if they can get any running game going against Michigan. Sam Callan, speaking of offenses not looking good, is Garrett Riley the answer at OC at Clemson? They were not good last year, and this year did not look very creative either. Yeah, it hasn't been great. And, he replaced Rhett Lashley to be the OC at SMU. And he didn't do as good of a job as Rhett Lashley did. He did okay. And then they move with Sonny to the TCU job. And in your first year, you go to the national championship game. Like, that was a quick rise. He was a G5 coordinator doing like an okay job 2 years ago or 3 years ago, 2022. And then suddenly 22, 21. Yeah. And then suddenly he's at Clemson. They have a lot of pieces there. For Cade Klubnik, was he like 19 for 38 or something like that? Like, could not recognize blitzes that were coming. Very, like you said, not creative. Couldn't run the ball very well. It just feels like Clemson has a limit, and I'm not sure if that's because of the talent or if it's because of just a combination of the play calling and whatnot. But it's not looked great. They figured some stuff out late last year, but that was a very tough start to the season. Patty C, I'm curious to keep watching Rice, and watching that offense was so interesting. Yeah, I mean, they only put up 14 points, but they beat Louisiana, and it's a ball control offense too. So, like, that's something. Sam, South Carolina went into a shell for a stretch, though. Yeah, I talked about it on the reaction pod, but like, there were a lot of teams. South Carolina, I believe, did this. Alabama did this. North Carolina did this. First drive looked good, and then really struggled for a while. And that's, again, about getting off of the scripted drive. What happens when the defense adjusts to what you're doing? What do you adjust back with? And for a lot of teams, there wasn't much of anything. Looks like Bill Belichick is talking at his press conference right now. I don't have the sound on, but let me pull up Twitter. Sonny Dykes says, I think we felt we all got a little disrespected. There was a lot of conversation about this game, and not much was about us. That is true. That is true. But we talk about them on the show. I believe David and I both picked TCU to cover, so it's not like we didn't see that coming. So doesn't look like he's giving very long answers. Let's see if I can hear. Pretty kind of basic stuff from Belichick right now. SS Chai, if you were to ballpark it after week 1, how many teams do you think could potentially win the national championship this year? 8 to 10, less, more? Let me look through my list right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, probably in that 8 to 10 range. Like, I don't know if, like, I'm probably not putting Utah there right now. I'm not putting South Carolina there right now. Florida State, I'm not ready to say that yet. But your LSU's, Ohio State's. I think Miami's in that group. I still think Clemson's in that group, I guess, even though everything tells me no. I'm not gonna quit on them now. Lewis Moore, how did TCU get respected? Most everyone picked them. I don't know if you watched the pregame or if you paid attention to much of the disrespect in the sense that nobody was talking about them. The reason this game was on Monday night on ESPN in a standalone segment is because Bill Belichick is coaching North Carolina. It's not because of TCU. If you want to call that disrespect, that's fair. I would just say to go back to the mother-in-law test. My mother-in-law doesn't know who Sonny Dykes is. They know who Bill Belichick is. So this happens. When you're a big name, when you're famous, you get the media attention. Some of it's praise, some of it's not. No, none of us here at The Athletic or nobody who covers college football for a living said North Carolina was going to win the ACC or compete for the playoff or none of that. We know what this is. But, Sonny Dykes was probably offended when he was going through Big 12 media days, and we keep asking him about Bill Belichick. How are you going to prepare for this? How are you going to prepare for that? What's it like to coach against him? I know he was asked those questions. So I understand, but that's the game. That's the business. You use that as a chip on your shoulder, and I think TCU very much did, and to an extent. Greg says, ESPN pregame, only Desmond Howard picked them. Of course, Desmond Howard picked them. But look, credit to Desmond. You don't want that screenshot of everybody picking a team and you lose, so you got to do that. Anything else from Belichick here? Sonny Dykes says he had no idea what to expect from UNC's offense and prepared for everything. Even spent a couple days defending the triple option just in case. Belichick says we're better than we were tonight. You better be. I can't imagine you being much worse. Oh, he said the thing. He said, we'll get ready for Charlotte. So he's doing the thing, which, to be fair, that is what you got to do. That's your next game. First-year coach Tim Albin over there at Charlotte. They looked not great, surprisingly not great against an App State team also with a new coach. That's the end for Belichick. Here's the other thing about disrespect or perceived disrespect. Bill Belichick's press conference was just on SportsCenter. Sonny Dykes was not. That is what it is. That is the game. Reminder, everybody, please like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't yet. The numbers keep going up. We love it. We're seeing it. We started this podcast, this show over from scratch, and we're doing some new things completely on our own, like this YouTube thing right here that we're doing live. I'm editing. We have no one else helping us. We're just doing it ourselves. I'm editing things and put them up and set this up and all that stuff. So we appreciate everybody who has been involved in helping this, throwing stuff in the chat, subscribing and all that. The week one reaction episode from today, already the best single day we've had for the show, which beats the week one preview, the previous record, which beats the week zero reactions, which beats the week. The last 4 episodes have broken a new record for numbers on the podcast. So that's been awesome to see. Even this, like, we have as many people on the show right now watching who were watching last night, and I wouldn't have expected that. But I like doing this. Here we've been here for a half an hour. David, but I didn't even mention this. David is at the game. David is in Chapel Hill. That's why he's not here. Poor guy. That's the 6th game of his tour. If you don't forget, he's got quite a few things to write about, so he's unable to join us. David tweets on UNC's opening drive. Sonny Dykes said the UNC look with 6 offensive linemen caught them off guard, weren't prepared to see it, and were able to shut it down after seeing it on ensuing drives. Again, that's called adjustments. That's what football is. That's why I love the sport. It's a never-ending chess match, especially in college football, when talent difference player to player is so much bigger. Like in the NFL, it just comes down to getting your guys to execute. And if they do that thing, you'll win. In college, You could have a guy play his best, and it's not good enough to stop the future first round pick lined up across from him. So you got to be creative and come up with other stuff. As the child, I'm glad you and David are back on the pod scene. I was sad when Until Saturday ended. So were we. Also, we have been discussing and trying to figure out how and when to get Damian Harris to come back on. This is a pretty good week with Belichick and with Ohio State. So we actually haven't reached out to him yet, but we were thinking about it. So perhaps that comes on in the future. What else did I have written down here? So Josh Hoover, by the way, TCU quarterback, was limping late in that game when a running back stepped on him. I don't know why he was still in the game. It was the fourth quarter. You're up 20, 31 points or something like that. Get him out of the game. He threw a touchdown pass, and they did. Belichick calling this the 33rd NFL team as a, I get it as a marketing thing. Like, that's what you're selling to recruits. That's what you have to do, of course. It's nonsense. If you want to, the 33rd NFL team, if we're being honest, it was Nick Saban's Alabama, and now it's Georgia. Just look at the number of guys they're putting in the NFL. If you want to go to the NFL, you don't need to play for Bill Belichick. You need to play for Nick Saban's Alabama because that track record is pretty good. So, again, the recruiting, the roster's got to get better. It ain't going to get better this year. You're not going to sign anybody off the waiver wire. So we'll see how North Carolina adjusts. Again, I don't think they'll be as bad as they were tonight. I also think TCU is pretty good. But man, what a humbling thing. Greg R2. And to think all of this happened because the Atlanta Falcons wouldn't hire him. Look, the Falcons haven't been great. So it's not like the choice that they made has totally paid off yet. But yeah, that's why they didn't hire him. It wasn't, by the way, nobody wanted to hire him. Bill Belichick is only here because nobody in the NFL would hire him. He wants to keep coaching. He wants to do a good job in college so he gets back into the NFL and break the all-time wins record, which I totally understand. But you're 73 years old or something like that? Like that's going to be tough. That is going to be tough. Sam, it just seemed wild that on that first drive, UNC was pushing TCU around and they were not. What was the adjustment? I'm guessing it's what I just read is that UNC had a lot of 6 offensive linemen and TCU wasn't ready for it. And then they were after that. And then again, so like scripted drive, if you don't know what that means, like you write out the first, 10 to 15 plays you want to run. And that's, you do that in the first drive. And then the defense will adjust to you based on what you showed on that first drive. And you go back and forth, and that's how it works. So just always remember, when a team opens a game up, drives right down the field and scores, does not mean that's how the rest of the game is going to play. It just means now the game is on. Because now I remember it's like, I covered Michigan State when they made the Rose Bowl, the Big Ten championship years, 2010 to 2015 under Mark D'Antonio. And Pat Narduzzi was the defense coordinator. Their worst drive of the game would always be the first drive. That was when they were one of the best defenses in the country for that 4 to 5 year stretch. And they would always allow points on the opening drive. Pat Narduzzi would see what you did, and they would adjust and shut you down the rest of the way. That's football. You're not going to pitch a shutout most of the time. So what do you learn from those times that people do move the ball on you? That's how it works. So that was a letdown, man. But it was a fun week of college football. As much as, Sonny Dykes is annoyed all the attention was on North Carolina, I thought ESPN did a great job of showing the whole scene. The sky cam stuff outside the stadium, just a standalone college football night, a single game. They treated it like a big deal. And that was and it was cool that it wasn't somebody who's had this a million times. It wasn't an Ohio State or a Notre Dame or an Alabama. We've all seen the big ESPN broadcast of the game at that stadium. It was cool to see it at North Carolina. It's too bad it didn't work out for those fans, but it was nice to see someone outside of the Blue Bloods get that big game treatment from the broadcast. I think my last thing I'll say here is I keep thinking about, so like I did an interview for CBS Sunday Mornings that's going to air tomorrow morning. Hopefully I don't look too stupid now that the way that game played out, because I had said I thought UNC might win 6-7 games. But the thing I keep coming back to is like UNC is investing in football at a level they never have before. Bill Belichick, they're paying him double what they paid Mac Brown, and they're paying Bill Belichick's staff double what they paid Mac Brown's staff. Now, if you're Mac Brown, you say, well, would have been nice to have that kind of money. Maybe I could have turned the program around. But the only reason UNC put forth that money is because its donors and other people were willing to pony it up specifically for Bill Belichick. They're paying all the revenue sharing, $13-14 million for football. They are investing it in a way that North Carolina never has. And the thought process is, can somebody awaken the sleeping giant? It's a program we always think should be good, and it just never gets over that hump. They haven't won a conference championship since 1980. That's 45 years. You didn't even just fluke your way into an ACC championship in that time in football. And yet it always feels like North Carolina is not terrible. They're not going 3-9. They're always in that like 6-7 win mark. Can you change that? And so they invested in more than they ever have. They made the big bet. You had Michael Jordan in town. You had Lawrence Thomas, Julius Peppers, Mia Hamm. All the UNC dignitaries are there. This was an incredible opportunity. A really, maybe for the first time ever, that level of support in one place for North Carolina football. And for you to lay that clunker out there in front of everybody and empty the stadium out by the third quarter, that is going to hurt you for a while. There are a lot of people who are going to say, all right, I'm going to need to see something before I believe in this program again, before I give it some more money again. And that is the ultimate, I think, loss here, is that it's going to be a bit harder now for Belichick to ask for a little bit more money to do a certain thing. They're already stretching the coffers as much as they can in North Carolina, and you lay that out. Good luck going to Michael Jordan and asking him for a couple of $1 million or something, because he's not going to see it after what he saw tonight. And that is where I'd be very worried if I was North Carolina, if you really blew it in that way. So we will see. North Carolina versus Charlotte next week. David is going to be there because he lives in Charlotte now. He should have the new setup at his house. He's moved in. He's planning to have the full thing operational, the lights and all that stuff by the next show. So that'll be fun. And we'll have a lot to talk about. So I appreciate everybody who's doing this. Again, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And 5-star review on the show, on the podcast. We read them all on the show. We've been loving all those. 5-star rating plus a review. We read the review. So I don't know. I've just had fun here talking college football for 40 minutes, and I appreciate you guys for listening as we continue to kind of grow this new show. So for David Ubben, who is not here, I'm Chris Vannini. We will see you on Thursday, and North Carolina needs to find something like a turnover chain. We'll see you later.